welcome to a very special cover story conversation. I have with me Dr. Sanjaya Baru. He's a political commentator, former editor, policy analyst, and he's also the author of several books, of course, The Accidental Prime Minister being the most famous. But he's also written a book on the 91 liberalization, how PV Narasimha Rao made history. And I think that is really the topic of our conversation today as we celebrate 35 years of liberalization. So welcome to this conversation, Dr. Baru. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, thank you.
So actually, we were discussing how, we've come a long way, or have we walked back through some of the gains of liberalization. But before that, who would you see is the hero of this great liberalization story? Is it Dr. Manmohan Singh, or is it the Prime Minister who stood behind him and made it happen?
The Prime Minister not only stood behind him, the Prime Minister appointed him.
Right.
The story of May 1991 is when Mr. Narasimha Rao, PV Narasimha Rao, became Prime Minister. The person he invited to join him as Finance Minister was Dr. I.G. Patel, who had been Governor of the Reserve Bank of India during the tenures of Prime Minister Morarji Desai and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, her second term. I.G. Patel had then gone on to London School of Economics, and I think he worked with the UN, came back to India, retired and settled down in Baroda, built a house in Baroda. Mr. Narasimha Rao told the cabinet secretary at that time, Mr. Naresh Chandra, and I've recorded all this in my book, 1991, that he wanted an economist of international stature as the finance minister, and told Naresh Chandra to connect him to I.G. Patel. I.G. Patel told Mr. Narasimha Rao that, look, I've had a long tenure all over the world. I've now retired. I've settled down in Baroda and I'm happily retired. I don't want to come to Delhi. And he declined the job of finance minister. That is when Mr. Narasimha Rao reached out to P.C. Alexander, who had been principal secretary to Indira Gandhi, and asked him to find out if Manmohan Singh was available. And that is how Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh was tracked down and then invited. So, if you want to, where does the story of the liberalization of 1991 begin? It begins with the day that Prime Minister Narasimha Rao decided that he needed an economist of international stature. And why did he need an economist of international stature? Because for the first time, India was financially indebted. We were borrowing dollars by selling gold or by mortgaging gold. We were in a serious external payments crisis. And therefore, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao decided that unless we have a credible finance minister who's respected outside India in the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other such institutions, we would not be able to attract support. So the real hero really is Narasimha Rao.
Fair enough. In fact, it's also very interesting because right now Manmohan Singh is, of course, a great favorite with the Gandhi family. But Rajiv Gandhi, I think, did not have much time for him. He called the Planning Commission a bunch of jokers at the time when Manmohan Singh was heading it. Am I right?
Yeah, you see, the problem with the Congress party at that time and even now is being a centrist party, they don't know whether they should bend to the left or to the right. And that intellectual confusion has always been there in the Congress party. And the 1991 reforms were seen at that time as something that benefited, private sector, because there was a huge increase in private investment and a lot of new businesses came into play. So it was seen as something that businessmen welcomed, that the IMF welcomed, the World Bank welcomed. And therefore, the Congress was not sure whether it should also welcome it. So even though the country benefited from the changes that were made, in some ways, those changes were also a rejection of the policies of Indira Gandhi. That also created confusion within the Congress party, because what Narasimha Rao was doing was subtly dismantling the license permit controlled Raj that had been erected by Indira Gandhi.
So who was more in favor of privatization, Narasimha Rao or Dr. Manmohan Singh? Because I'm not sure where Manmohan Singh stood in that, welcoming privatization.
You see, Dr. Manmohan Singh himself went through an ideological conversion. Because after all, he was the chief economic advisor during Indira Gandhi's phase of nationalization. In, between 1970 and 75, those 5 years or up to 76, if you see, that was a period of Indira Gandhi's left economics. She needed the support of the left parties at that time. And therefore, she nationalized banks, she nationalized mining, she nationalized, steel industry. So many sectors of the economy were all nationalized. And the left supported her for this. And Dr. Manmohan Singh was very much part of that process. His thinking changed only towards the late 80s, the second half of the 80s, because by that time the world began to recognize the rise of the East Asian economies, particularly Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong. And so a lot of economists were saying, "Oh, look, we have missed this bus. The East Asian tigers were rising and the world was looking at East Asia." And therefore, I think Dr. Manmohan Singh was one of those people who began to change his thinking. But at the same time, he was quite happily working with Chandrasekhar, Prime Minister Chandrasekhar, who was very much a left of center prime minister. And so I think, in a sense, in the case of Dr. Manmohan Singh, it required some amount of intellectual adjustment to the kind of policies he was undertaking. Narasimha Rao, on the other hand, really had no strong views on economic policy. He went along with the bureaucracy. I mean, I remember, in fact, I've quoted Naresh Chandra extensively in my book. He was the cabinet secretary. And he called Naresh Chandra and asked him, "What should I do?" And Mr. Naresh Chandra had a written statement on policy reforms. Incidentally, Montek also had contributed to that. He was at that time working in the Prime Minister's office and then had become Commerce Secretary. So these papers were there, and Narasimha Rao told Naresh Chandra, "Go ahead, if this is what has to be done, let's do it." So he did not require intellectual conversion as much as Manmohan Singh required.
Fair enough. But now you have, of course, another duo, another prime minister and finance minister. How do you compare what is happening? Is there any comparison really between what is happening today between the Nirmala Sitharaman and prime minister versus the workings of Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh?
No. I think Nirmala Sitharaman is a cipher. I don't think she has made any impact as a finance minister. Her only contribution is, like a good housewife, she has maintained the fiscal balance. Well, people appreciate her for her fiscal management. But as an economist or as a policy maker, I don't think there has been any great contribution on her part.
As with
Ultimately,
any other minister in this government, I would say.
indeed. I mean, ultimately, the prime minister is responsible for almost everything in this government. And I think the fundamental difference between the Manmohan Singh Narasimha Rao team and the Modi Sitaraman team is that, both the 1991 was essentially about a regime change, a policy regime change. So it was about creating a new policy framework within which there was stimulation of private enterprise, the animal spirits of enterprise, and all of that stuff happened. And then international investments began to come into India. While I think with Prime Minister Modi, we essentially look at him as someone who's a project manager, building roads, building railways, building airports. He's more project-oriented prime minister rather than a policy-oriented prime minister. I mean, the one area in which he tried to do some policy reform on land and farms, marketing, etc., he had to finally retreat under pressure from the farmers and other forces. So he's not been such a policy-oriented man as he's been a project-oriented man.
And his economics have been very leftist rather than not even left of center, in terms of all the welfare projects, rather than harsh economic reforms that are also the need of the hour.
Yeah, actually,
He tried, as you said.
I keep saying this, that, if you look back on the last 10, 12 years of Prime Minister Modi, and you ask, in whose term did we see this kind of a focus, whether on economic policy or on politics or on governance? I think his role model was really Indira Gandhi. I think Prime Minister Modi's role model, in many ways, in more ways than one, was Indira Gandhi. who was not a great leader as far as economic performance was concerned. In fact, the worst years for the Indian economy were the Indira Gandhi years. The Indian economy performed reasonably well during Nehru's time. After independence, the first 10 years were good years. And then it started performing again well in the 80s, particularly mid 80s when Rajiv Gandhi became prime minister. But our worst years were Indira Gandhi's, and in many ways, there's thinking of this government in terms of government playing a bigger role, subsidies, handouts, and then of course the whole style of governance is really back to Indira Gandhi days.
That's true, though. I don't know. Maybe they would be happy with the comparison. I think, at some way, if you compare him to Indira Gandhi, because she's the best out of all the Congress prime ministers,
Right.
as far as Modi is concerned. But back to the liberalization time, a bit about if you can walk us back at that time. That time, the opposition came from within. There was a strong left, liberal, leftists within the Congress who were opposed to all this opening up also.
No, the opposition was total. The BJP opposed what was being done by Mr. Narasimha Rao. The Congress internally was divided. The left opposed. In fact, when I look at the kind of student protests happening now, I'm reminded that the biggest rallies in Delhi were the rallies against liberalization in 1991. I don't know if you recall, Boat Club from India Gate to Vijay Chowk was full of red flags. It was one of the biggest rallies that I have seen in Delhi, and that was against the policies of liberalization of Narasimha Rao. So there was a lot of opposition from the left, from the BJP, and from within Congress. But I think the critical factor that enabled Narasimha Rao to go ahead was the support he got from Prime Minister Vajpayee. We must pay tribute to Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, because from the day Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister till December 1992, when the Babri Masjid incident happened, so for a whole almost 1.5 years, the Narasimha Rao's government was virtually a minority government. It didn't have enough numbers in parliament, and yet it survived, because I think there was a tacit understanding on the part of between Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and Mr. Vajpayee that India is in a difficult situation, the economy is in crisis, we need to stabilize, and the government should finish its job. And I would give credit to Mr. Vajpayee for the role he played as a leader of the opposition in supporting Prime Minister Narasimha Rao.
That is actually true, which we don't see happening right now. I think Narasimha Rao, as we discussed earlier, opposition came more from within than from outside.
Yeah.
But he didn't win that election. End of the day, economic reforms don't win elections. We saw even Chandrababu Naidu, who was one of the first to bring in IT and all, he lost the election soon after. Narasimha Rao lost the 96 election.
Well, I think he lost 96 for several reasons. First of all, the benefits of many of the reforms of 91 actually start flowering towards the end of the 90s. If you look at even the numbers in terms of the performance of the economy, but also the benefits of all the new investment that people like, the Ambanis, Reliance Industries, Sunil Mittal in Airtel, the IT jobs, all those benefits started coming in towards the end of the 90s. And that is why Prime Minister Vajpayee continued with the policies of Narasimha Rao. Second factor was, of course, the Babri Masjid demolition, which within the Congress party created a lot of dissonance. And therefore, there was not much support from Narasimha Rao even within the Congress. People like Arjun Singh, etc., were working against him. And finally, it is true that the economy has never been a major factor in Indian elections. There are so many other factors that come into play.
We'll take a break and come back and keep the conversation going and try and connect the then to the now, what is happening now and where, have we actually walked back some of the gains of liberalization. So stay with us. Hello and welcome to a very special cover story conversation. I have with me Dr. Sanjaya Baru. It is 35 years ever since we undertook the liberalization of 91. But where are we now? Have we, you talked about the good times and the highs, but when did the story start going wrong? When did we start walking back on some of the gains?
Well, I think the benefits of 91 lasted for about 2 decades. I would say from 1991 till 2011. Those 2 decades saw the positive impact of economic liberalization in terms of new industries coming up, new investment happening, share of private investment in national income increasing, relative stability of prices, increasing foreign.
Despite the Lehman Brothers crisis, we weathered that too.
Till the Lehman Brothers crisis, we were doing very well. I think the problems in India began slowly after 2011, 2012. Both the governance challenges as well as economic challenges began after that. And then we have seen only some spurts of recovery, but each time there was some improvement, there was a knock. I mean, first there was demonetization in 2016, which set the economy back. Then there was COVID, which set the economy back. And now there's a global crisis, which is setting the economy back. So we've had major challenges which have not allowed the economy to regain the kind of momentum of the early 2000s, when during last years of Prime Minister Vajpayee and the first term of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, the Indian economy was growing between 7 and 8%. Now, that has not come back to us.
And now I can, have you here and not talk to you about the youth protests that are going on. They're also about education, but at the back there is the job crisis also. The economy is very much the undertone of the crisis that we see on the streets today.
Absolutely. I mean, the NEET protest or the problem about a leak in the conduct of NEET exams, I think that was only a trigger. That was only a trigger. I mean, after all, the whole thing began in a sense with the launch of the Cockroach Janata Party, right? Which was in response to a very supercilious remark of the Chief Justice of India. Now, all of that, was a trigger to what was clearly underlying youth anger, discontent. It's a range of sentiments. I mean, if you watch the whole what has been happening over the last few days, it's a combination of anger, of disappointment, of a certain nonchalance, a disregard for authority, because authority has not delivered. When people in power have not delivered, so why should I respect somebody who has not been able to deliver, right? So there's a combination of sentiments that has been triggered by this. But I think overall it reflects the price we are paying for the economic slowdown, for the lack of jobs, for a certain pessimism about the future, which was certainly not there in the 20 years after 91. I mean, that was a period of optimism.
There was also a period of the dream budget when the economy was doing well, but now you yourself have written a book on how the flight of capital away from out of India.
That's right.
We're just not the destination for capital anymore.
Yeah, there's a series of things going wrong. I mean, the immigration of talent, immigration of capital, the lack of domestic opportunities, and then a lack of seriousness. I mean, the whole focus on irrelevant issues about the content of syllabus. Should we be writing about Mughal history or not? These are all marginal issues in the life of a nation. The centrality of progress is which is what 91 was about. What was 91 about? It was about saying, I mean, go back to the famous speech of Dr. Manmohan Singh. The last line of that budget speech of July 1991 was that the idea, that India is an economic powerhouse. The idea that India is an economic powerhouse is an idea whose time has come, right? That he didn't say the idea that India is a Vishwaguru. He didn't say the idea that India is a great power, leading power, major power. No. The phrase he used was the idea that India is an economic powerhouse, is an idea whose time has come. That was the quotable quote of that speech. Now, why did we focus on our being a powerhouse? Because when we looked around in Asia, we saw China rising, we saw Korea rising, we saw Taiwan rising, we saw Malaysia rising, Indonesia rising. The experience of Asia to our east played a very important role. People forget, for example, that the note that Dr. Montague Ahluwalia wrote on the need for economic liberalization, it was actually a note written by him when Prime Minister Vishwanath Pratap Singh went to Kuala Lumpur And in Kuala Lumpur, when he saw what was happening, said to Montek, who was then working with him in PMO, said, look, how is it Malaysia has done better than us? So Montek said, sir, I will give you a note on this. That is how that famous note of what is called the M note of Montek was written in response to a question from VP Singh that why has Malaysia done better than us, right? So that period was when we are asking ourselves, how come Asia to our east is rising and we are not doing so well? So it was triggered by a feeling that India must rise as an economy before it becomes whatever Vishwa Guru or a great power, leading power. All this terminology was
Yeah.
not there at that time.
Today, the question is how come Vietnam has done better than us, or even Bangladesh at the end of the day?
All East Asian countries, all East Asian countries. In fact, when Prime Minister Koizumi, Junichiro Koizumi, who was the Prime Minister of Japan in 2004, 2005, when he met Dr. Manmohan Singh in 2005, he asked him an interesting question. He said, look, Prime Minister, India is in the middle of Asia. Asia to your east is rising. Asia to your west is unstable. In which direction do you think India will go? This was a question in 2005. And that was the question for us. Are we going to be like East Asian economies, rising as an industrial economy with investment in human capital like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Korea, all of them? Or are we going to be unstable like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran? Is that our destiny? That was Koizumi's question to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. In some ways, that question remains even today.
Absolutely. But I think to an extent, I mean, the fact that now belatedly people are realizing Dr. Manmohan Singh's worth, I think people, there is the back of the mind is that we need a good, sound economy going. How does India now get out of this trap that we are in? Do we, manufacturing, is it a done story? Should we now focus on services, AI rather, technology, services, of course, but technology? What is the way out?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question to answer. First of all, we cannot give up on manufacturing. After all, we need to create jobs outside of agriculture, and manufacturing is important. And there are many ways in which manufacturing sector can grow. Agri processing, labor-intensive areas. It's not as if those areas are shut to us. It means improving the competitiveness of these sectors, investing in new technologies, training workers. In fact, we have a paradox today that in many areas, industrialists complain that they are not able to get quality labor because the technology is changing, but the labor is not adequately trained, right? So there are a lot of things which we can do to increase labor in manufacturing, to increase manufacturing sector employment. But I think the real issue is you need to have a government that is fully focused on doing this. I mean, the energy of everybody from top to down has to be on reinvigorating the economy. We have diverted our energies in all kinds of stupid things, wasting the political energy of the government in promoting a range of useless, backward looking agendas and ideologies. We need to be as focused as China was, which, Deng Xiaoping's famous thing, that doesn't make a difference what color is a cat as long as it catches the mice. You need to take a pragmatic view. What is it that works? What is it that doesn't work? Invest in education, invest in manufacturing, make the economy the focus. I think that's the message of 91. That was the message of Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh team. We don't have that kind of focus today, whatever speeches may be made. And we need to return to that focus.
Not even in any state, any chief minister who you think is doing a good job?
Well, there are some states which already have taken off. I mean, Tamil Nadu, in a sense, has taken off. Gujarat has, in a sense, taken off. They're all living on past performance. The foundation is in the past. In some ways, Telangana has been a beneficiary of past investments, and so has Karnataka. There's some attempt in some states. In UP, Yogi Adityanath has tried, but still, his attention is divided between all kinds of silly causes, cow slaughter, this, that, otherwise. Not one agenda of
Focus.
creating employment, urbanization, industrialization. That is what we need.
And I think that is where the Congress is looking for a model. That is where they can actually step in because, like Modi had the Gujarat model, good or bad.
Well, the Congress has to first begin by accepting that Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh did something great in 1991. The Congress even today does not accept Narasimha Rao as one of their great prime ministers.
I think his photograph has finally made it to the Congress party office, the new Indira Bhavan. So that's a step. But you have a point. Thank you so much for this conversation and a look back at the glorious 91 years and whether we can recap that glory once again. That's a question to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.